Hello to everybody. I'm happy to greet all the participants of the workshop. My name is Gryzun. I am a professor of Kharkiv National University of Economics, Kharkiv, Ukraine. I'm happy to introduce my co-authors, Bilousova and Zhytienova. The topic of our presentation is interactive methods in blended learning of the fundamentals of UI/UX design by pre-service specialists. The blended learning concept is widely researched by lots of authors and practitioners, and according to studies, the concept of such a learning is understood as a combination of in-person education and online opportunities when materials are presented and worked out online, but with the typical conventional classroom spirit. Despite the great advantages of blended learning, there are also some challenges as for its successful implementation. And among them, it's involving students into active form of work and classroom spirit and necessity to overcome physical disconnection, which is typical for lots of models of blended learning. And according to our own experience, these core challenges can be and must be overcome with introduction of interactive methods into blended learning activities. The purpose of our work is to analyze the core features and challenges of blended learning, to core the potential of interactive methods in blended learning implementation, and to highlight the experience of their practical realization in the process of the fundamentals of UI/UX design learning by university students of different specialties. The theoretical background of the work is made by the core features of blended learning, basic approaches to the learning of the fundamentals of UI/UX design in the training of different specialties, and common learning techniques used in the practice of blended learning. There are quite a lot of common blended learning models which are distinguished by the researchers, among them online driver, flex model, rotation model, and others. For current situation, the typical blended learning model for lots of universities nowadays is a distant learning in Moodle-like platform and supported by online classes. Among the typical blended learning activities which are widely used at universities, we could say that they are flipped learning, gamification, digital storytelling, and many others. However, in lots of research, it is pointed out that typical blended learning activities, despite their great potential and great advantages, they must be introduced and innovated with common interactive techniques, among which are lectures of selected kinds, game methods, debate methods, group solution methods, and others. The typical types of interactivity which are distinguished by the researchers, they are student and the learning object or content, student teacher, and students teacher, so-called types of interactivity, where teacher expects involving the students into the interaction among themselves and individual students with other students in the group in the presence of the teacher or with him in real time. So we tried to implement exactly this one. This last type of interactivity, students with the help of the teacher. We also, based on our own practically driven approach to learning of UI/UX design basics, we distinguished the invariant part of curriculum as the set of academic modules which provide rather universal basis for the design mastering, and the variable part of curriculum with focus on the mastering of different specific instruments of UX/UI design. For example, in the module, within the module, on the psychology of visual perception. The main forms of work were flipped learning lectures and workshops and different master classes. Uh, we tried to enrich flipped learning activity with interactive techniques in some special ways. For example, flipped learning lecture on the topic of psychological mechanisms of data perception was arranged in the forms of online mini conference. In advance, they were assigned different tasks to the pairs of students who were presenters and listeners at the same time, to learn theoretical material of the features of different data perception, to find out proper examples which illustrate proper peculiarities, to elaborate presentation, and to take part in the mini conference both as presenters or experts and listeners. One of the tasks for a pair of student presenters was to learn psychological background of human perception of exactly textual information on the screen and how it is connected with UI design. During online mini conference, where it was interaction between presenters and listeners, students who were presenters shared their findings in their presentation. They explained that the efficiency of reading depends in linear way on the amount of characters visible by eyes. They covered the reasons of this fact, attracted listeners' attention to the paradox of this cognitive and psychological phenomena. At the same time, at this mini conference, listeners were encouraged by the presenters and by the teacher to discuss the connection of these findings with the problems of efficient interface. They were attracted to speculation and making conclusions on the efficiency of the perception of isolated words and words connected into the long phrases, the difference between task-driven content and driven user interface, and different other problems which led them to that typographic decision making and the interface design, etc. Presenters, after this discussion, presenters supported the prepared discussion with the visual examples of both types of user interface, illustrating fruitful and not fruitful using of these psychological peculiarities. A different example, how we try to enriched gamification technique within Classcraft environment with team role game activities. Each student should choose a character, a role of a wizard, warrior, healer, etc., with proper skills, and cooperatively had to learn a topic of the module, of any module, in fact, while doing different quests. The students had to apply their skills regarding their role. They tried to contribute their best into their team success, doing quest tasks and obtaining different bonuses, which gave the participants various additional opportunities. And also they helped their team to achieve common learning results in the most efficient way. Also, gamification technique within Classcraft environment was enriched with the team activities while solving in groups boss battles tests. Besides this one, in addition, we also applied gamification approach with group work upon real-life tasks. In the progress, for example, of learning how to create dynamic prototype of the site with landing pages, the students were assigned special tasks like this one. Imagine that you are director of a coffee company and the company want to create a site to talk about coffee, about the company, services, and so on. The students were divided into the three main groups: analytics, developers, and testers, according to the roles which are typically fulfilled by UI UX designers at the different stages of the prototype development. And the teacher encouraged interaction within groups and between groups via debates based on Socratic method of discussion. And thanks to this kind of activity, each members of the groups were perfectly well informed with the main goals of each groups with their final results, and also the groups themselves realized the role of both analytics developers and testers in the main process of prototype developing. Our different strategy, which we used and enriched with group activities, was digital storytelling. For example, within all of the modules, we assigned to the students group task on the creation of student-generated comic-based story with a didactic purpose to investigate the influence of color palette, for example, on the emotional state of a user and the implementation of its impact in the UI development. We provoked and encouraged discussion for group solutions finding while discussing these basic questions. What is the aim of the telling your story? Who is the target audience of your digital story? And so on. After the preparing basic common-based digital story, the groups demonstrated their comics and told their digital stories on the said topic during online practical classes. Other students were involved into the critical watching of their peers' work. Ready-made digital stories in such a way were used as cases that enabled to involve all of the students into productive case studies. They said the digital stories can be successfully used also as the didactic aids for further generations of students. Our observations as for the students' cognitive behavior allowed us to make some conclusions. Applied interactive methods enable to the students to feel their classroom atmosphere during online classes. They promoted their cognitive eagerness to work with remote digital resources and definitely contributed a lot into the development of efficient learning communication, which helped overcome disconnection between the students and the feeling of the dissociation inherent to blended learning in its flex model. Thank you for your attention. We are ready to answer your questions.